Hey everyone, welcome back to another recap podcast from SNXweave, where we give quick weekly recaps of news and important updates from the previous week from the Spartan Council and core contributors, as well as discuss what the Grants Council and ambassadors are up to, so let's get started. Last week was a big week for SIP presentations, with 6 being presented to the Spartan Council, so let's review each of these proposals. The first was SIP 364 to reconfigure the Grants Council. Mike presented this SIP, which proposes reconfiguring the Grants Council so that it can more efficiently serve the present and future needs of the protocol. The primary change would be to eliminate the Grants Council as an elected body and replace it with a single appointed technical lead who will onboard 2 supporting positions to make up a 2 of 3 multisig. Mike's rationale for this SIP was that the number of inbound, high-quality grant requests is currently insufficient to justify a Grants Council the way it's currently set up, and that this reconfiguration would allow the new team to take a more proactive role in supporting protocol needs. Ideally, this position would be assigned before the end of the epoch so that they can coordinate with the outgoing Grants Council on any ongoing projects. Caleb and Kane commented that the selection process and criteria should be specified in the SIP. Though this position would be subject to reassignment every epoch, the goal is to bring more stability to grant funding. So the ideal candidate would therefore be someone who can take on these duties on a longer-term basis. Caleb commented that the compensation should also be mentioned in the SIP, and Adam requested that the expected deliverables for this role be specified as well. After some discussion, there seemed to be consensus that this should be a full-time position. The next presentation was SIP 353 to improve protocol coordination. This proposal aims to improve development coordination within the synthetics protocol, ensuring that decentralization does not lead to disorganization. Cav explained that this SIP would eliminate the Core Contributor Committee in its current configuration as a representative body elected by core contributors, and replace it with a single position appointed by the Spartan Council. The primary objective is to improve accountability and coordination between governance bodies. Specifically, the Spartan Council, who sign off on the roadmap, the Treasury Council, who allocate the funding, and the core contributors, who execute the roadmap. This position will take complete ownership of the protocol roadmap under the direction of the Spartan Council. This will likely be a current core contributor who is appointed by the Spartan Council rather than an external candidate. Duck suggested coordinating with Mike on adding selection criteria and replacement process language to the SIP for clarity. This position would have to be reconfirmed every 6 months. The next presentation was SIP 367 for the Synthetics v3 deployment to Arbitrum. Building on all the knowledge acquired from the deployment to base, this SIP proposes to continue expanding the chains that Synthetics is on by deploying to Arbitrum. Rather than waiting to deploy to Arbitrum after the base deployment is scaled, this SIP would deploy v3 to Arbitrum as soon as possible to allow for LP collateral to build organically, and both deployments could then be scaled concurrently. The Arbitrum deployment will experiment with the usage of additional collateral types, including ETH, USDC, DAI, and ARB. Part of this effort will include a grant application to receive some initial funding from Arbitrum's long-term incentive pilot program. This funding, if awarded, would be used to provide LP and trading incentives as well as support the stablecoin that LPs will be able to mint. There were some questions as to whether the stablecoin was necessary and if it added any value to the product. Most of the Spartan Council initially voiced support for leaving the stablecoin out of the initial deployment, but agreed it might be valuable to have after some follow-up discussion in Discord after the call. The next presentation was SIP 2059 for the legacy spot synth migration. Presented by Caleb, this proposal will add a rebasing mechanism to balance the depth pool skew on L1 and prepare for the transition of spot synths to V3. This would be accomplished by levying a funding rate on spot synths that track volatile assets. It would incentivize holders of volatile spot synths to exchange into stable synths that track fiat assets, which would reduce depth pool skew and provide a lever to disincentivize skew in the future. The next presentation was SIP 363 to list SNX, Sol, and WIF on Perps v3 on base. Sol was chosen because it's the next blue chip behind ETH and BTC, WIF was chosen as the hottest new meme coin, and SNX was chosen because the community has expressed a lot of interest in an SNX perps listing, but it was never possible in V2 since it was backing SUSD. They all would incentivize users to shift over to perps V3, particularly to make use of perp assets not listed on V2, such as SNX and WIF. The last presentation of the evening was SIP 368. This SIP seeks preemptive approval to list the W token, the native token of Wormhole, once it launches and has perps listings available on centralized exchanges. This token is expected to have massive interest at launch, and by authorizing the listing ahead of the actual launch, the protocol would be in a better position to capture more of the initial volume. The W token is expected to launch by the end of March. Adam asked Bert to add language specifying that the configuration SCCP be conditional on the token already being traded. In Grants Council updates, SNXweave is working with a dev to get any final comments and issues fixed for the Watcher page. The other dev, who's working on the arbitrage bot, also gave the Grants Council an update, saying that the early numbers are looking really promising for automated arbitrage trades between centralized and decentralized exchanges. They're aiming to have a draft of this complete by the end of the governance epoch. Currently, the bot can open positions on centralized and decentralized exchanges and run through a lot of checks to ensure that these are opened correctly. A beta version of the position monitor was also finished, which aims to ensure positions won't get near liquidation. And lastly, for a quick ambassador update, the team hosted a Spartan Space last week with Pith. Head to our blog for a link to the recording of the call, and be on the lookout on Twitter for the ambassador's upcoming governance update tweet. And that's it for today's updates. Be sure to check out our weekly recap blog post, share this podcast link, and let us know what you think and what you'd like to hear more about from SNXweave. Thanks for listening,